Rebecca Seawright on yet.
Right. She did say she would sign in at 6:30. So after our intro, if she's not on, maybe we'll just start with Marlene, but let's see what happens because she had promised to sign in promptly at 6:30.
I'm afraid if she has a lot of things to go to, if we don't let her go first, she may not be able to.
Yeah, she's going to go first. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's give her another couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have Saida do the intro part?
Yeah. Yes, and I'll start now. And if Rebecca hasn't signed in by the time I'm done, so if Marlene could just hop in, we'll see what happens. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us for this meeting of Community Board 8's Women and Families Committee and the Voting Reform Task Force. Later in our program, we'll be providing an update on plans for redistricting the New York City Council. But first, we want to address a crucial, even existential issue that voters need to keep in mind this November, which is reproductive rights. Clearly, abortion is on the ballot this fall, but attacks on our rights may not end with that issue. Beyond abortion, contraception, marriage equality, and other rights could be jeopardized depending on voters' choice this November. So what can we do to safeguard reproductive and other human rights? Tonight, we have a panel of expert speakers who will explore these and related issues. Our speakers include New York State Assembly member Rebecca Seawright, who will describe New York's Equality Act, which among other benefits would enshrine reproductive rights into New York State's Constitution. In addition, we'll hear from Dr. Marlene Freed, Professor Emerita of Philosophy at Hampshire College and a national expert on reproductive rights. Sarah Mueller, Resource Development Director at Bridget Alliance, which provides assistance nationally to women seeking an abortion. And Sherry Weiner, co-chair of CB8's Voting Reform Task Force. Sherry will describe ways the public can keep reproductive rights front and center of voters' minds this November. Following these presentations, we will take questions from the audience. And after this Q&A session, the Voting Reform Task Force will update us on the status of plans for redistricting the New York City Council. During the Q&A sessions, please click the raise hand function under the reaction button at the bottom of your screen if you would like to speak. So for now, let's get right to our program. Is Assemblymember Seawright here?
Not as yet, no.
Okay, so we'll start with Marlene Freed, and thank you very much. What we'll do is after Marlene is finished, I guess then we'll ask Assemblymember Seawright to speak. Thanks, Marlene.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be on this panel and to be with all of you tonight. It helps me avoid the gloom and doom of facing the current political hot mess, and that's the polite way of putting it. I'm here with my usual recipe for activist fuel, complete outrage at what is going on, a sense of urgency, and yes, optimism. I've been an activist for reproductive health rights and justice for most of my adult life, and so the only way to keep going is to be optimistic about the prospects for change. So I promise that I will get to the opportunities and the hope, but first we do have to go through the outrage and the urgency.
Professor, excuse me, I see our assembly member just came on and she has a limited amount of time. Would you mind if we let her go first so she could give her presentation?
Fine.
I apologize. Yeah.
I'm gonna mute myself again and you'll just.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize. I was on and it wouldn't come off mute. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Women and Families Committee, co-chaired by Peggy Price and Gail Barron, and to the Voting Reform Task Force, co-chaired by Anthony Cohen and Sherry Weiner. And to my fellow speakers this evening, Dr. Marlene Freed and Sarah Miller. It is so fitting that today this meeting is taking place on National Voter Registration Day. We're all reeling from the disastrous decision of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. And this is just the beginning, having already gutted the Federal Voting Rights Act. The court has made clear that we can expect further attacks on the LGBTQ community, especially trans children and their families, marriage, contraception, and more. During a special session this past July, the governor added my Equality Amendment, the expanded Equal Rights Amendment, to the agenda. It's a state constitutional amendment that creates new protections in our Constitution against discrimination based on a person's ethnicity, national origin, disability, and sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy and pregnancy outcomes, and reproductive health care and autonomy. The Equality Amendment is needed in New York State to protect individuals based on their race, color, ethnicity, national origin, and all the categories that I just mentioned, explicitly to protect individuals in their reproductive choices. Limiting or eliminating a woman's choice is sex discrimination. We included reproductive autonomy, which is the power to decide and control one's own contraceptive use, pregnancy, and childbearing. For example, people with reproductive autonomy can control whether and when to become pregnant, whether and when to use contraception, which method to use, whether and when to continue a pregnancy, and decisions in childbirth. To protect national origin and ethnicity, which are often proxies for race discrimination. This bill will promote equality of opportunity for people with disabilities, both by banning disability discrimination and by affording enforceable legal rights to people with disabilities. The constitutional amendment passed with overwhelming support this past July. To update the Constitution, it needs to pass 2 successive sessions. We're starting a new 2-year session cycle in January, where we feel that this will pass a second time, and then it will be eligible to go on the ballot as a referendum before the voters. I want to talk a little bit about the federal ERA. We've been fighting for an equal rights amendment since 1972, and although the ERA was first drafted in 1923 by 2 leaders in the women's suffrage movement, Alice Pail and Crystal Eastman, the original version was approved by Congress in 1972, which states that the equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged on the basis of sex. As of 2020, the 2/3 threshold has been met, with ratification by 38 states, and now Congress must eliminate the original deadline. Even if we pass the ERA on the federal level, we need the Equality Amendment on the state level to shore up New York's constitutional protections so that the guarantee of equality will not be easily eroded. I will be leading the fight for passage of this amendment again this legislative session, which starts in January, to ensure it comes before the voters in the presidential year of 2024. If passed this session, it will appear on the ballot for the voters. We're expecting a strong fight from the religious right, who've already promised to spend millions of dollars to have this defeated in New York State. We must keep up the momentum by organizing and mobilizing people within our own networks. This amendment truly impacts everyone. For example, I will not only speak to my elected colleagues and constituents, I'll reach out to CUNY Law School and other law schools around the state to ensure that we're leaving no stone unturned to educate and to spread awareness for the importance of this equality amendment. And I encourage all of you to do the same today. We have a broad coalition of organizations around the state who've come together that have worked very hard on this amendment. And so I'm confident that we can update the state constitution and achieve this goal of the Equal Rights Amendment being updated to our New York State Constitution. Just today, I had spoke at the funeral of the late Sarah Weddington, who is still the youngest person ever to argue a case before the United States Supreme Court and win. That was Roe versus Wade. I was one of 3 people to speak at her funeral in January, and I was looking at her book today, which was published by the Feminist Press at CUNY, and she predicted that Roe v. Wade was likely to be overturned. And she said the way to deal with it is for everyone to update their New York State constitutions. And so I feel very strongly that we will get that done in New York State. I thank our governor for adding it to the special session as agenda in July. It was one of 2 bills that was added to the special session. We have strong leadership in the Senate. Our Senator Liz Krueger is carrying the same identical bill in the Senate. Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who leads the Senate, as well as Speaker Hasty, are in total agreement on this legislation, as well as our Governor Kathy Hochul. So I do think we will get it passed early in the legislative session, and we will start to mount a campaign as it goes before the people as a referendum in 2024 to pull together resources around the state among various organizations to educate voters on why this is necessary and why it's needed. So I thank you again for inviting me tonight, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. And we will have the question and answer period right after our speakers have concluded. That was very helpful. And thank you so much for being with us tonight, Assembly Member Seawright. So at this point, we're going to move back on to Dr. Freed, who is joining us from Hampshire College. Thank you very much for being with us, Professor Freed. And would you continue with your presentation?
Hi there, and thank you again. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Rebecca. I'm still here with my sense of outrage, urgency, and you've just added to the hope. So that is a positive thing. I'm actually in Boston, where in Massachusetts, we also have a protecting legal abortion. So I'm in another blue bubble with you guys. I want to talk about briefly about the national threat. Are we going to be able to show the slide of the map? It doesn't matter. As
Yeah,
people,
yes.
can you do it?
Yeah. So,
Yes, do you need to be able to share your screen?
You know what? It's okay. Let's not bother. If people have seen these maps, which show the status of the bans, and so there are places where abortion is already banned, places where it's likely, and places where it is allowed. And as you look at it, what you'll see is, of course, the coasts and the top look not so bad, and then there are these huge places where there are bans. About 24 million women live in states with bans, and by the time they're through, it's likely to be half the women in the country. What does this mean? What do the bans ban? That is the question. At the moment, it's legal chaos. We're in uncharted waters. There are some impacts that we already know. There's the high-profile case of the doctor in Indiana who performed an abortion on a 10-year-old survivor of rape and is being investigated for that. But most of what's going on is actually not visible in the national press. Nancy Davis was a person in Louisiana who was pregnant and denied an abortion for a fetus with a fatal abnormality because the fetus still had cardiac activity. She said, basically, they told me I had to carry my baby to bury my baby. A woman in Texas suffering a miscarriage, doubled over in pain, screaming, denied care, told to go home and return only if the bleeding was excessive, which was being defined as filling a diaper with blood every hour. There are many reports like this, people who are showing up at emergency rooms for pregnancy complications and are being turned away until things get worse. Mostly what this means is get so bad that the dangers to the fetus make it clear that it would be okay to perform an abortion. But of course, getting worse might also mean endangering the woman's life and health. And apparently that is not against the law. Before Roe, we relied on many doctors of conscience. But today, that's different. Things are really different. The stakes are incredibly high. Before Roe, there were actually very few prosecutions. But today, there's extensive surveillance, and providers risk jail time in Louisiana, 15 years for performing an abortion, a $200,000 fine, and in many states, a loss of license. Still, we know that some providers will commit civil disobedience, and we must stand ready to protect them and defend. And just a snapshot of the looming national threats. The national abortion ban, which Lindsey Graham has introduced, listen to the language. It's called the Protecting Pain Capable Unborn Children from Late-Term Abortion Act. Protecting pain-capable unborn children. There's so much wrong with that. The only exceptions are for rape, incest, and a mother's life or health, not even fetal anomaly. In some of the state bans, there are no exceptions at all. It seems that nothing is too extreme for many Republicans. After years of subterfuge, I think the goal is so clear. Make abortion impossible for everyone for any reason. Criminalize as many as possible, and ultimately end all abortions. Fetal personhood is another step in that direction. There's a petition to the court from Rhode Island on behalf of 3 pregnant women's fetuses. The argument is that fetuses have a standing to challenge that state's law protecting abortion. Personhood has been debated for a long time. In 1980, there was a human life amendment proposed to the US Constitution. It failed. But now personhood is gaining traction. So far, Georgia is the only state that actually has it. Arizona has one. but it's enjoined by a judge. But since Dobbs, nothing is off the table. The Supreme Court can declare a fetus a person, and they really might, even though such legislation has been defeated over 300 times. Dobbs opens the door. The Dobbs decision mentions unborn persons many, many times, sort of a roadmap for how to go on this. And we already know that that court doesn't really care about the majority, about being popular. They're really not popular. Personhood is the real prize for the anti-abortion people. We don't know what the full consequences will be, but what we do know is that fetal personhood cannot coexist with a pregnant person's personhood. Fetuses will have more rights than a pregnant person. With personhood laws, a person could be guilty of manslaughter or murder for miscarriage. And doctors could be prosecuted for murder, for performing an abortion, or helping with a miscarriage. And that is, in a way, the landscape that people are fearing right now. And as Margaret and Rebecca said, we're also waiting for the other shoe to drop on all these other issues of autonomy and freedom that the Dobbs court has signaled it would go after. So this takes me, oddly enough, to my prescriptions for optimism and for rallying our side. What are we called to do in this moment? The first thing I think is to really learn from the opposition. They are and always have been playing the long game. Overturning Roe was a 50-year project. But we also have to get what we can in the short run and connect the two if we can. They always overreach and turn losses into victories in terms of building their own movement. We need to look for openings like that. The immediate future of abortion rights is on the ballot in November. And we have a chance. And this is where we have to really resist the gloom and doom and think we just can't do it. The polls tell us that abortion has moved up as in the list of issues that people care about and are willing to vote for. And there are large majorities in every religious group. And as we heard, states like New York and Massachusetts are codifying the protections and putting money into abortion access. We need to keep supporting that in all the states where that's possible. In California, there's legislation protecting digital privacy for abortion-related communication to try and combat the surveillance. That could be a model for other states. What else do we need to do? Widen our lens. We need to build a bigger movement with a more expansive agenda. And I'm actually so delighted that tonight is a joint meeting with the Voting Rights Task Force. Reproductive justice gives us is a good framework for how to meet this particular moment. It helps us link seemingly disconnected issues like voting rights and reproductive rights. And the fight for reproductive rights is not separate from the right for democracy. Reproductive justice centers the people who are most impacted. Roe really never did mean abortion rights for everybody. It never had any access provisions in it. 75% of people who get abortions live either below or near the poverty line. And what that means is that all 1,336 restrictions which have been passed since Roe disproportionately burden those people. So we need to connect the right to be pregnant with the right not to be pregnant with the right to have children. See that bigger picture. For women of color and low-income women, there's a whole range of issues that connect to autonomy, unequal wages, disproportionately living in poverty, near environmental pollution, poor housing conditions, segregated schooling, targeted immigration surveillance, high maternal mortality rates, and devastating infant mortality. We have to go big and bold, be far-reaching in our demands. And it's really hard now because I think people want to hold on to whatever ground we can get. But really what we know is if we ask for less, we get less. We need to take direct action. The abortion pills are not a panacea. There are access issues there too. But they are playing an important role in abortion access now and will in the future. And we can all play a role in making them more accessible. Not just fighting for telemedicine and against the efforts to criminalize it, but stock up, learn about self-managed abortion with pills. Tell everyone you know about it, spread the word. And most important, let people know that there is no way to tell that a person has taken the pills unless they tell. So it's given that the risks of self-managed abortion with pills are legal and not medical, they're very safe. People really need to know that. And I would say finally, find inspiration. Yeah, even in Kansas, from Latin America, from wherever we can get our inspiration, people are considering all kinds of things in really dangerous situations. They're thinking about mobile clinics, floating clinics, clinics on federal lands. None of that's easy. But what's very clear is that advocates for abortion rights and reproductive justice are not conceding, not being quiet, telling all of our stories and making everything as visible as we can. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful and most helpful for all of us. Is Sarah Muller here? No.
I don't see a Sarah Muller, no.
Okay, that's great. So Sherry, would you
Yeah.
speak?
Yeah, I'm sorry that Sarah was supposed to be joining us. I became aware of an organization that is actually boots on the ground in helping women to get abortions. It's called the Bridget Alliance. It's a New York-based 501c3, and it is a referral-based service that provides people seeking abortions with travel, food, lodging, childcare, and other logistical support. And what's unique about them is that they prioritize clients beyond 15 weeks of pregnancy because it's harder to find providers near home. So as states prohibit abortions, we know that women have had to travel. We've heard stories of hundreds of miles to get abortions. And how do they get here? As the professor just said, these are mainly poorer women of poorer means, and they don't have the ability to do this. So what Bridget Alliance does, it has helped 125 plus clients a month with an average cost of $1,250. So they're paying for these women to get to the abortion clinic. They're paying for their food while they travel. They're paying for childcare. That's always a problem. Who's taking care of their children at home? So I wanted to bring this organization to your attention. Saida will be putting in the chat there how to contact them. It's bridgetalliance.org. If you're moved, to give them a donation so they can continue to do the support to enable women who are seeking abortions to get the kind of services that they need. And we just thought it was important to tell you about this organization. So hopefully some of you will be moved to make donations to them. So as I said, the cost is $1,250 a client. That's a lot of money that they have to keep on raising to help these women out. And I just think it's very worthwhile. Thank you, Peggy.
Sure. And Sherry, did you mention that you knew a couple of places that organize letter writing or postcards?
Well, you want me to do that next? I'm
Sure.
ready to
Yes.
do that. Okay, so what I wanted to talk a little bit about was how we can help in New York. As the Assembly member said, today is National Voting Registration Day. So if you're not sure of your registration status, you can go to elections.ny.gov. That'll also be on our chat. Now, Alita sent me a very interesting quote today. The New York Academy of Medicine has referred to voting as part of the social determinants of health. So what that means, that the ability to vote, as with housing, food, education security has significant effect on your health. So if you don't vote and other people are not encouraged to vote, it actually affects your health. So how do we do? In New York, we're very fortunate, as Assembly Member Seawright said, we have protections in New York that women can get abortions, but this is not the case across the country. And two ways that we can help are participating in postcard campaigns. You can write a postcard. It's been shown that people who receive handwritten postcards are more likely to vote. And this has been proven in 2022 and 2021. What you do is you sign up. I'm going to give you the website in a minute. You're sent postcards and addresses and instructions, and then all you do is provide the postcard stamp and mail the postcard out to the voter. So what this group has done, and it's called, the website is turnoutpack.org/postcards. That's also in the chat. So what you do, you say, gee, I really want to get involved. I want to send postcards out to some of these states that we have to, because we're trying to ensure that we have pro-choice legislators and members of Congress. And those of us who are in states that have that reproductive protection need to reach out to states across the country that don't have that. So if you're inclined to send out postcards, reach out to turnoutpack.org. Now, another very effective way to increase people voting is phone banking. And I've identified an organization called Sister District, whose email is sisterdistrict.com. And this group focuses on state legislative races. Now, this is particularly important because as we see, the whole issue of reproductive rights has now moved to the states. And the professor has talked about all of these states who are now prohibiting abortion rights. So we need to get in these states, we need to elect officials who respect a woman's right to choose. So what we're trying to do with these postcards, this is now phone banking, we're trying to flip the state legislatures into Democratic majorities or hold those majorities. And if you want to do more, if you're comfortable with phone banking, if you have a candidate that you're really in favor of, let's talk about Pennsylvania. We have John Fetterman, who's running for Senate, or we have Susan Wild running for Congress. If you are so inclined, in addition to obviously sending each of these candidates financial contributions, you can reach out, go on their website, and it'll allow you to volunteer. And of course, if you have friends and relatives who are in any of the states that are starting to prohibit abortions, you should be reaching out to them to vote for candidates who will protect a woman's right to choose. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you very much. And before we move on to questions and answers. I wanted to ask Dr. Freed. Sherry was pointing out that there are a number of states where situation is particularly precarious. Are there some states, and Sherry mentioned Pennsylvania, are there other states that you would point to where it would be great for people to target their efforts using abortion as a focal point?
Can I just briefly, before you answer, Dr. Freed, we can talk about issues and people being pro-choice or anti-choice and specific issues, but the community board is supposed to be apolitical, so I would just suggest that we not mention particular candidates or parties, but no problem talking about the issues. So that's, I just want to make sure everybody's on that before we get the answer to that question.
Oh, well, could we mention just states where the...
Sure.
Yes, you can talk
yeah.
about particular states and issues, and that's fine. We just can't get into
Okay,
specific
great.
parties or
Yeah.
candidates.
Okay, yeah, Dr. Freed, if there are states you would point to? Oh, could you unmute yourself?
She's muted.
Oh.
Thank you. I just want to say one thing I should have said at the absolute beginning, but since people are all referring to me as Professor and Dr. Freed, my activist identity is much more pronounced in my own life than my professor. I am, yes, a professor. I've been one forever, but I have also been a political activist in this movement for a long time. And I also wanted to add to what Sherry said about the Bridget Alliance, the National Network of Abortion Funds, which is an organization that I worked with and was the co-founder of, is all over the country and is working with Bridget Alliance to directly help people find abortion services, get what they need to get. So if you're inclined also to work with an abortion fund, they're in New York, there's the New York Abortion Fund, NIAF, and you can Google it and they will be delighted to put you to work. Now, in terms of the answer, I just had this on my screen. Oh, here we go. Tell me if I'm allowed to say what I'm going to say. Yes, okay. Advocates are focused on races in 9 key states: Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida. And I can send that to you later, Peggy, or you can put it in the chat. We can't put things in the chat. So, there are just certain places where, as we all know, razor thin edges mean that our side can make gains. So, believing that and acting on that is absolutely critical.
Thank you. Okay, great. So we're going to start with questions from the public. And I see that Erica, could you unmute Erica, please?
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually just came off of on and off over 24 hours. I think every 2 years, the organization's Markers for Democracy and Postcards to Voters and the Downtown Nasty Women's Group, I think, in New York, they do a 24-hour event that I've never seen anything like this. I've only been writing for them for, I think, 2 or 3 months. I found them on Twitter, and this was the sweet spot. Not only that, but there are studies now that show that postcards and the postcards that all these groups have written since 2017 have swung things. So I wanted to say that I'm going to send you that as well, because I'm trying to get the word out about these amazing, amazing groups across the country now. If anybody has any questions about it, most people on Shari knows me and can, get that out. But we heard from Mandela, Russell, help me out. Mandela, the young Mandela Barnes. We heard from a young man who's named Skylar, who's running out in the East End for state office. The lineup that they had was just unreal. I mean, David Pepper spoke earlier today, but they do this for 24 hours. And I would highly recommend that if you don't like, doing the phone calls because nobody answers, you don't feel comfortable knocking on doors. Not only are the postcards a way to get to people, but it's also quite therapeutic as you're, trying to do your thing. And I've written a few thousand letters and postcards in the last few months, and the Kansas race was one of them. So
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We're just going to finish with the public members before we go to the community board. Elaine, you had a question. Could you unmute Elaine, please?
You said Elaine?
Elaine Walsh.
She's on his Verizon Wireless's iPad.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had already said Verizon is Elaine. I just want to say thank you to the committee for raising the issue. I'm not sure what Russell said, but we are having a discussion on women's rights. It doesn't matter the political. I am tired of the restrictions that are put on. I am thankful to the committee for raising such an important issue. I think the whole abortion issue is indeed political, and the Supreme Court has violated our rights. And I hope that in the future, we can continue to fight for the rights of women and the right to choose, and stop hearing from men who do not understand. And Russell, if you do, come back. But I was upset and embarrassed by your comment. Thank you very much for letting me speak, Peggy.
So I'll just respond briefly to say the community board is apolitical. That's a requirement that we have to fulfill. So all I'm saying is we just have to keep the discussion in line with what we're allowed to do. We're allowed to talk about issues that are important, but that's all I'm saying.
And I just want to clarify, the two names that I mentioned were just two that I had come across that were doing phone banking. There was no meant to endorse them. They were just as I researched phone banking, their name came up. So that was not meant as an endorsement. It just said there are many candidates who would welcome your efforts to phone bank for them.
Thank you. So we have another public member, Molly Allison. Could Molly unmute herself?
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I'm also aware, I've been aware of the Bridget Alliance, and I'm also aware of another organization called Haven that helps people coming from out of state to obtain abortion services in New York. My question had to do with, is the Bridget Alliance encountering any legal issues as a result of their support of women? And if one, as an individual, would work with these organizations, are we at risk legally? Is there anyone on the call who might speak to that? Maybe.
Marlene, could you?
Maybe Marlene, yeah.
So as I said, we are in such legally uncharted waters. We don't know in some sense. I mean, not about the. And so far, I don't think you can be prosecuted for supporting them. But we just don't know what the opponents of abortion will go after. And the abortion funds are in exactly this position. If they give money to someone who's traveling to another state for an abortion, is that okay? And so a lot of the abortion funds have sort of stopped taken a pause to try and figure out the legal landscape. But we're not going to know that for a while.
Thank you.
The other thing to say is that while the work of Bridget is crucially important, most people will not be able to travel far to go where it would be okay. They're not gonna, I mean, I take it New York is actually experiencing a surge. We're not yet in Massachusetts. Partly because of what people said, it's expensive, you need childcare. It's just beyond the pale of what you think you can do. So it's very important to try and find where the local networks of care are. To me, that's why abortion with pills is so important, because we can get them everywhere, and if people know about them. But
Yes.
I think there's no, everything that seemed sort of preposterous is no longer something we can discount. But at the moment, I feel like we're called to do what we can do, and sometimes that will involve taking risks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm going to go to the board now with questions, starting with Lori Boris. Lori, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, thank you, Peggy. This is an issue that I have been dealing with for a really, really long time. As many of you know, my grandmother, my mother's mother, died from an illegal abortion when my mother was 7 years old. And it was kept secret in the family, and it was just my investigative reporter's skills that I was able to uncover this at a late age. But in any event, I wanted to make a point that I think is very useful in arguing people when you're trying to convince people who may or may not, be on the same page with us. It's really important to emphasize the statistic that 60%, more than half of the women who have abortions are already mothers. And when you think about that, I find it impossible to understand how people who are opposed to abortion cannot see that it's an attack on women. It's an attack on mothers. It's an attack on people who want to take control, to make decisions for their own bodies. And it just makes me nuts. I mean, it's just my comment. I just want everybody to remember that 60% of people who have abortions, it's probably more now, but it's 60% already are mothers. And so when you talk about it's not anti-woman, yes, it is, because my grandmother died because she wouldn't go to a hospital. She bled to death in her bedroom and left her children without a mother, and it completely screwed up the family, which I will not go into now. But this is still affecting my family today, So that's all I'll say about that, except to remind you, here's my very effective sign, which I bring to every anti-abortion rights protest. It's my grandmother's gravestone. Okay, so anyway, now that I'm over that, what I wanted to ask Rebecca if she is still here. Is Rebecca?
No, she's left.
Oh, she's not here. Okay, all right.
She had a lot of commitments tonight. Yeah, she
all
couldn't
right.
stay on.
I'm sorry that I was not able to ask her that question. But the thing that I wanted to ask her was if New York State passes their
Equality amendment?
No, that's not the question. It's not the New York State question. It's if all of the states, had passed or have passed, up until New York, I guess, the Equal Rights Amendment, and we're waiting for it to be. I'm confused about the legality of it. And the question to me is, are those states all going to have to go back and do the Equal Rights Amendment again? Because obviously when many of them passed it, they were, composed of the right, the right people who are thinking about it in the right way. But I'm wondering, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the answer to this, but does it mean that in order to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed on a nationwide level, that we're going to have to go back and have all the states pass it again? Maybe Russell, you know that, I don't know.
No, what happened, the issue was that there was Congress passed a deadline in order to have the 38 states passed it, and we reached 38 beyond the deadline. So the easiest thing to do was just to have Congress remove that. And that's
Extend
what
the deadline,
Carolyn Maloney has been working on. So
My-
now
my
they don't
underst-
have
yeah.
to. Go
I'll
ahead.
just add briefly. I mean, my understanding is there are some states that have tried to undo their ratification. And I think there's a live legal question as to whether that's allowed or not.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
thank
very
you for
much.
all that both of everybody does for this issue. It's so incredibly important.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Lori. Appreciate it. But actually, we're going to go back to the public again because I see Elaine Walsh has a comment to make. Elaine?
Yes, I just wanted to respond. That is what is said, is the rights of women have become political, and that the men who are the majority in all the legislative areas, local, state, or federal, do not support women's rights. And so while we would not want it to be political, Russell, I totally disagree with you. We have a responsibility as a community in the Upper East Side in Yorkville to state what our positions are. And if it's become political because of the men in power, it's political. But we need to stand for the rights of women and their choices on how they govern their own bodies. And I'm tired of hearing from men that they think they control us. And that is our problem on all levels of government. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
Sorry, I don't know how to make this clearer, but yeah, of course, we can make our views known in favor of supporting a woman's right to choose. All I was saying is we can't talk about particular parties or candidates in the course of this meeting. That's all.
Thank you. Okay, going back to the board. Ed Hartzog, could Ed be unmuted, please?
Ed, confirm unmuting on your side.
Sorry. Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I raised my hand, Peggy. We talked about this, and since we're talking about political parties, I don't offer this for that reason. But since it is a joint meeting with voting, I just wanted to share with folks, just from a different angle here, brief moment, because I talked with Peggy about this. For those who want to be involved for voting, for exercising your franchise, I leave to everyone else who is very well versed in this issue, the issue we're on and the states that are involved. I offer to you, for those here, if you're interested in being on the phone or going to states and doing things on the ground with respect to voting, I'll share with you. I won't put it in the chat because it comes from a partisan organization. Many here have heard me speak of it. It's called the New York Democratic Lawyers Council. And for those who are on the equal time, I did reach out to my colleagues in the Republican Party here in New York to get the name of the New York Republican Lawyers Council, because I know nationally that both major political parties have lawyers associated with this. And just from that end, because it is important, because it is at the voting booth where all this really takes place, all this happens. If you're interested, I guess I can put my email in the chat for those in the public or on the board. Would like the name, the organizations you can get involved with. If you would like to go out into states, I can put you in touch with the Lawyers Council. They do voter protection. Again, not talking about issues, not endorsing candidates, but just in terms of if you want to go out, if you want to help people in terms of answering their questions about voting, absentee ballots. I did this last year or last cycle for Pennsylvania. The Lawyers Council runs a voter hotline. It is open to everybody. I would imagine because it is a party run hotline that it tends to be one party calls them. But if you're interested in that, I'm happy to put you in touch with those folks, get you involved, heading out. But I think a lot of the organizations I've heard tonight are involved in all those kinds of things. Peggy and I and Sherry, we talked about this before the meeting. So that's the only reason I raised my hand, was just to throw it out there. And if anybody has any comments or questions, I'll answer them, but I'll stop and let you all take Rita's questions or comments, because I'm sure they're much more cogent and thoughtful than me just being sort of a.
Thank you. And if anyone is interested in Ed's contact at either the New York Democratic Lawyers Council or the New York Republican Lawyers Council, please get in touch with me at price.margaret@att.net, and we'll get you the information.
And if you want mine's real simple. It's my first name, my last name with a period in between @Gmail. It's my full name, Edward dot. And if you want that, anyway, thanks.
Oh, terrific. Okay, thank you. And Rita, can Rita get?
I am unmuted.
Oh, okay.
I am the grandmother of 2 college students. I would like to see this. First of all, I'd like to thank this committee for bringing this to the board, but I am scared to death because I think that this is a major step forward in making women a second-class citizen again. And today it's abortion. Tomorrow it may be the color lipstick that you can wear. Or tomorrow it may be what clothes you can wear. What I was not part of it. It was, remember that march with the pink hats with the leaves in them? There were millions of women. How did that get organized? And do you think that something like that needs to be organized? Again, there are women in states that are afraid to march, are afraid to do anything, but voting is private. Nobody knows how you vote. And so, does anybody know how that march got organized so that there is a momentum in this country against becoming a second-class citizen?
Marlene, would you address that, please?
I think we had a huge motivator at that moment, which is, we're not supposed to mention names, but Donald Trump. So at that moment, it was the organizing was somewhat anarchistic in the beginning. I mean, people were desperate to do something and to show that they weren't going to stand for this. But I think one of the things that you said is really important, that people's situations are totally different. What they feel they can do, what risks they can take, what can they show their face, can they be public? And what I'm hearing here tonight is that there are so many ways to participate, and all of them are important, every last one of them. So, for voting, for going house to house, for calling. I hated the calling myself because most people don't answer, but when they do answer, they're like amazing. They bless you for calling. So I think whatever people can do, if your thing is to directly help people with information about pills or work with the abortion funds. Every single thing is critical. But I also think, and I want to say this again, it's not the most whatever, it's a long fight. Think about our opponents. They worked for 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. So we need to show that same persistence, fortitude, stick-to-itiveness that we see there. So that's a long answer to what you're, there's just no, I wish there were a magic bullet. And I think people are really frustrated because the urgency, the sky is always falling on women's lives and rights and reproductive freedom, but it is.
Thank you. Elizabeth Ashby, could you unmute Elizabeth, please?
I have a question that isn't really related to advocacy. It's related to challenging the laws that ban abortion. I learned years ago, I happened to be on the Manhattan homicide grand jury, and you can't murder a corpse or a cabbage. So they defined a person, and that was defined as a person is a human being who, having been born alive, remains alive. Maybe other laws define people, what a person is, but you have to do it, I assume, for the homicide laws and all of those. So I would wonder where people who've looked into laws that say it's not a problem in New York, but laws that say a fertilized egg is a person or a fetus is a person, that would contradict what you said a person that you could murder is. And I just put this out. I'm not a lawyer, but a light bulb went off when we got instructed on whom you could murder. And I would think that other laws have to define what a person is in state law to do it, or who a person could do so on. And I just wonder if in challenging laws, one could investigate and see if these fetus is a person laws contradict other laws that they have like the homicide law. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to speak to that? Marlene?
I think, unfortunately, we are in a moment where a lot of legislators and a lot of judges don't care. I mean, they're hyper focused on the idea that a fetus is a person from the moment of conception, and the ability to enshrine that in law. And over many years now, there's a kind of, in some states, there are enhanced penalties for harming, having a car accident when there's a pregnant person. I mean, there was just this crazy case in Texas. A pregnant woman was driving in the HOV lane, and she said she shouldn't get a ticket because in Texas, there were two people in the car, she and the fetus. So I think what we're looking at is a situation where there is chaos. I mean, there's a lot. If fetuses are declared people, and only in some states but not others, we're just looking at a complete patchwork of laws. And I wish you were right. I wish people. I mean, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights defines a person as someone who is born, but all legal precedent, etc., does not seem to be a moving importance to the Dobbs court. So I don't think we can just imagine that we will hear the end of fetal personhood.
Erica, did you want to also comment? Could Erica be unmuted, please?
The easiest way to put it is it's not science. It's not science. That I work in healthcare and science for 27 years. It's not science. And arguably, going through a pregnancy is way more dangerous than having an abortion. Going through pregnancy for a woman is one of the most dangerous medical odysseys, for lack of a better word, that you can go on. And that's well documented. So, I mean, I'm truly at a loss. So I'm looking, I mean, and there's nobody else who can really, except for, you know, my mom's generation, she's 75 and a baby boomer, and they, you know, they thought this was settled. So as a Gen Xer, I don't know, do we take our eyes off the ball? Because we thought it was settled too at 53 years old. Like, I don't have the words anymore. Like,
Thank you.
Can I just say one thing though? I think most people don't believe that a fetus is a person just like you and me. The people who are making the laws and policies, most of them don't either. I mean, really,
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell doesn't care. Trump didn't care. So I think this is a political issue, as Elaine said several times, and it's working for certain people. But I think the most we can do is go directly to people. You know, I think the thing that was it, I forget, Lori said before.
The postcards really are working.
The what?
Postcards are really working.
We're talking to people. You know, this is like, don't be afraid. Did you hold up the sign that said "No shame, no stigma"? I mean, just
I did.
Tell your story. If you
I have it ready to go whenever there's a.
That's it. Yeah, and you know, make people. I mean, people have got to face this. And the other thing is this sort of fiction that there are people who have abortions and there are people who have babies and they're different people. And that's why it's so important to remember that most of the people who are having abortions are already mothers. So you can't cut it up like that. It's all of us that are implicated in this. We had a campaign at the subway once that showed a bunch of people and said, which of us had an abortion? And the answer was all of us. Yeah, sorry. I'll get off my soapbox briefly.
Erica, did you want to comment again? No, okay, great. So I see Rita has a question, and after that, the board is going to decide whether or not we want a resolution, but let's first hear from Rita.
I have a question, and I don't know the answer. I don't mean to be facetious. There is the alt-right who says, you know, conception is when you first kiss a guy. You know, I know that's stretching it a little. However, has anybody used religion who is not an alt-right person, who is somebody whose religion allows them to decide to have an abortion? Have they ever used that they are not bound by the religious right of other people on their lives? I don't know the answer to that, just out of curiosity.
So there is a lawsuit now, I think it's from the National Congress of Jewish Women, arguing that these bans on abortion are a violation of their religious freedom, because their religion does not ban abortion, and in some cases actually requires it. So I think that, and also let's not make all religious people the alt-right. Most religious people also are against what Dobbs did. So somehow we have to begin to drive those wedges out there and have it translate into voting and policy.
Thank you.
Alita, could Alita be unmuted? Was it? Oh, she's not here. Okay. Yeah, Lori, could Lori be unmuted?
Hi. Yes, in answer to your question, Rita, also many of you know that I teach at a Roman Catholic school, a Jesuit school. But I only, first of all, I only teach second graders. So and I teach them that God, I don't get into like the other, the women's issues, as I call them. And obviously the Catholic Church is totally out of step and out of, with most of their congregation, I would think. All of the teachers that I speak to, my fellow instructors, all of them are horrified by the Supreme Court's decisions. So it's just a matter of, like religion is a very personal thing to me. It's like, it's just to me, and what's brings me comfort. And so nobody's going to, take that away from me. But by the same token, I am the last person on earth to defend the thinking of the hierarchy. It's like my favorite joke is, who are the worst men for women? The ones who wear dresses, priests and judges. And so, and that is true, and I will, go head to head with the priests, and, talk to them about this stuff. And in fact, I did talk to one priest when, I don't remember like the occasion, but I told him my grandmother, who had 3 children, died from an abortion, and I mean, I thought he was going to fall off the chair, but it's like, they don't know. Because they're people who have never experienced this. They are not women. They're not people who can become pregnant. And so similar to all the legislators who are not women and have not, and not doctors even, and not understand, they cannot understand a woman's experience. They cannot. And so because most of them are male, this is, I think, our primary issue, is that we have to replace the legislators with more women. We have to have more women in office, and we have to educate them, which is another word for lobby, lobby them about the realities of this.
Thank you.
That's it.
Alita, did you want to speak?
I did this time. Thanks, Peggy. I just wanted to say that someone mentioned earlier, and I joined pretty late, so if this was said, I apologize. And if it's totally off track, just mute me. But this is all tied into demeaning women and putting women in, quote, their place, because it's also tied into the idea that a woman could be raped, could have a baby, and the rapist could have parental rights. And that exists. It is a very difficult thing to remove those parental rights in 43 states, including New York. So I just wanted to raise that, because all of this is tied in, and there's a terrible slippery slope with the idea that a fetus is a person, because it leads to questioning doctors who treat women for all kinds of things, to birth control, to in vitro babies, to just even things beyond that, to research and healthcare. And it pretty much is a disaster, and the disaster will affect men too, because they will not be able to get certain treatments that might have otherwise been devised. So that's it. And I just wanted to make the point about the rape, because it has been bugging me for a really long time, and is embarrassing that New York State is one of those states that makes it very difficult to rebut the presumption of parental rights for rapists. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Sondrea, did you want to speak?
Yes, hi, thanks. Greetings all. Yes, for me, I'm an ordained minister and a woman has a right to make decisions in regard to her body. The overturn of Roe is simply horrific, and we have to continue to fight and advocate for not just our grands or our nieces, but for the future. So we have to, make sure that's restored because we should have the right, women should have the right to choose. Nobody should be able to tell them what they can do with their body. And especially when it comes to any type of rape or incest, someone shouldn't have to carry a child with that stigma. So that's, and I'll just share this. One of my aunts, she's deceased now. She was molested as a child down in Florida. And she was a young girl. And my mother was one of the older siblings, and she caught the man and hit him with like a broom or something. And, but she gave birth she had to give birth to that son, but this was way back when. But I would think if it was later on in life when, abortions were more readily available, she might have not had my first cousin because she gave birth to him as a child, a young, she wasn't even 15. She was about 12 or so.
Oh,
Wow.
please, I'm not calling anyone.
So that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Let's hear from Elaine, and then the board will see if they want a resolution. Elaine?
I want to thank everybody who has shared their stories and the issues about the right of women to make their own decisions on their bodies. As far as the Catholic Church, the Pope has been clear to its bishops and cardinals and whoever else is in that hierarchy to stop focusing on abortion, that this is not the primary issue of the Catholic Church. But there are still conservatives that do it. But I think that for women, our choice is our body. And we must move to change who represents us on whatever level of government, that people understand that women have a right to make their own decisions. And I appreciate what Dr. Fried said and everybody else on here, because as I sit here, I am a social worker and have been for, 40 plus years. And prior to the right to abortion in New York State, I had many of a child in the foster care system who became pregnant and had to go through a process because some of it was a medical procedure that they would not survive the pregnancy. And having gone through that and seeing what a young woman, 14, 15 years old, was subjected to and controlled by the state was outrageous. We need to have in place the right to choose and make our own decisions, and for minors to have the right help to let them choose, given the right information and not what comes out in most of these clinics that are pro-life. So I think this was such an important discussion tonight, and I only hope we could share it with the broader community, because so many of our young people are still facing this today. And while in New York we have the right to abortion, we don't know what will go on down the road on the federal level. So thank you for really Peggy and Gail for having this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alita?
I just want to mention one more thing. There are, and I only learned about this from my kid and work she's been doing on COVID and HIV, is that there are social determinants of health. So food insecurity, housing insecurity really contribute negatively to health outcomes. And one of the other social determinants of health is voting. So the loss of voting rights coupled with all of this other business is important for people's health. And so in thinking about all of this and in taking action with state and local and federal legislation, it helps actually people achieve better health, to have that kind of say. And it's unfortunate that what we could get in terms of voting and participating in voting and not losing voting rights is so completely lost by the effect of, and the chilling effect, which goes beyond state borders, of the anti-abortion movement. Because the efforts, the last time you did this, Peggy and Gail, the speaker from, I guess, Washington Law School had said that a doctor from New York, let's say, landing in Texas could get arrested for performing abortions out of state if that's what they enable. And so the whole thing is just really, it's bad, and it has an effect, I think, on people's health beyond just the anti-abortion state. So I know it's a very muddled response, and thank you, but I wanted to mention how wide-ranging this actually could be.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Dr. Freed, Marlene?
Just one more thing, something Elaine said made me think of this. We haven't mentioned tonight crisis pregnancy centers, which masquerade as Planned Parenthoods or other things, and are really a risk factor for young people who are trying to get abortion services or to learn things. So I think there's a stepped up movement across the country now to expose these centers, to let people know. And often they're in small communities where there may not be. There are many more crisis pregnancy centers than there are abortion clinics. So it's yet another place where people might put their energy.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. Right now, I want to ask the board if they would like to create a resolution. Rita, did you want?
I'd like to make a resolution that that we support the rights of women to decide what to do with their bodies, no matter what, not just, but that we support women who, I can't go on, other than that, and to prevent us from becoming second-class citizens.
Well,
maybe that part we don't need, but
I think that's such an amorphous. I frankly, I think the only resolution, and I'm not really sure that it's needed, is a resolution in support of Rebecca Seawright bill. But it sounds to me that it's already moving through the legislature, and frankly, since this has to be done by tomorrow, I'm just not sure that we really need a resolution. I hear what you're saying, but what are you saying? We all agree, but who would we send this resolution to? It's the one you're proposing. I really do not think it's appropriate.
I'll take it back.
Okay, but
that's my opinion. I just don't think it's appropriate for the community board to do a resolution.
Well, let's hear from some other people. Russell, would you?
So I think we can do it. I think, and I was doing a thumbs up to second. I think, frankly, the resolution could do both. I think we can have a resolution both that affirms our support of a woman's right to reproductive rights and autonomy over, their own bodies, and also the same resolution could also advocate for passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, if in New York, for the New York State Constitution, if we want to do that, or we don't have to. But I think they could be two resolutions or one resolution that does both. And I think in terms of timing, yes, it's the day before the full board, so I think it's not a big deal if we just push it over until, sort of to your point, Sherry, it isn't necessarily a sort of urgent
No
thing that
time
necessarily
urgency.
needs to
Yeah,
get done.
there's no, yeah.
So I think if we hear it at the October full board meeting, I think that would be okay. And I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do in light of the fact that it's tomorrow. And I would expect us to be able to get a whole resolution in time.
Okay, so, and let's just hear from Rebecca Dangor. Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what the language of the resolution is, but I just want to make sure we would send it to people in DC in addition to locally, because really, I think we're very fortunate to live where we live on this issue. And I think really where we need to be putting pressure, and who knows how much this will help, but at least it'll remind everyone who we're representing here on the Upper East Side that we care. I think this has to go to all of our senators, our local Congress representatives, et cetera, in addition.
Right.
That's really, I think, where the fight is going to be. So.
Thank you. Alita? No? Oh, okay.
I didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. My hand is still up, but I didn't have any additional comments.
Oh, that's
Sorry about
fine.
that.
Elaine, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say maybe it's more expedient to just do a letter.
Oh,
I'm also happy to write a letter. Yeah, whatever you guys want to do. What does Rita think?
Rita, what do you think?
I second what Russell had said.
Okay, so we'll do a resolution, and the broad scope of it will be we affirm affirm the rights of women to decide what to do with their own bodies, and support the passage of the New York State Equality Act, which would enshrine abortion and other rights in the Constitution of New York State.
Sounds good to me.
What do you think?
So that's Rita's. Yeah, that sounds good. So I'll second that. I guess that's Rita's resolution. I'll second it.
Yeah, I think it would be good to combine them into one. It just
call the question.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Well, let's say anybody opposed.
Yeah, let's do the right.
Yeah.
Opposed, abstaining, not voting for cause, they can raise their hands, right? We'll just have Saida read out the list of who's here on the record voting.
Yeah, Rebecca.
Okay, that's it.
Okay. Oh, Rebecca, I'll unmute you.
Thanks. I just want to make sure that I raised my hand not to vote against the resolution, but I was against calling a question.
No. We just need a list of people from the board who are here right now. I know that there's Rebecca.
Okay, I have the list.
Okay.
Elizabeth Ashby, Lori Borres, Sandrea Coleman, Rebecca Dangor, Suzanne Evans, Ed Hartzog, Sahar Hussein, Rita Popper, Peggy Price, Russell Squire, Sherry Ringner. And I can email you that list, Peggy.
Oh yeah, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. So is anybody opposed? You're not opposed. No.
I have a
You're
point of
unmuted.
information.
Pardon?
I have a point of information. By including both, what exactly does that mean? Does that include language that goes to the federal and That goes to DC.
So the be it resolved, for example, would say that affirms our support for the rights of women to decide what they can do with their own bodies, and further supports the passage of the Equality Act in New York State, which blah 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 would do blah blah blah. So that would be the be it resolved.
Okay.
Okay, so this passes unanimously, right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you to Assemblymember Seawright, to Dr. Marlene Freed and Sherry Weiner for their excellent
Don't
presentation.
you want me to do the redistricting update?
Yes. I'm just thanking people for this portion.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. And we'll continue now with Sherry.
Just want to give you an update on where we are with city council redistricting, since I see people who haven't really been involved. Just give you just a real brief background. Every 10 years following the census, as the federal and state redistricting has occurred, we also have to redistrict the city council districts, and these redistricting would be in place for 2023. The redistricting is done by a districting commission, which is made up of 15 members, 7 appointed by the mayor, 5 by the city council speaker, and 3 by the Republican minority leader. And the new lines have to adhere to strict guidelines, the U.S. Constitution, the Federal Voting Rights Act, state laws, and the city charter. So where we are, there was a proposed map presented to the public in August. The main thing that did was it proposed that 50 blocks of the east side of Manhattan and Sutton Place, in other words, York and First Avenue, would be moved over to a Queens City Council District, District 26, as well as Roosevelt Island. So they would be taken out of District 5, and then they would become part of a Queens City Council District. Obviously, there was a lot of opposition to it. There was a public hearing held in August where many members of our community participated. The 2 districts that we're concerned about as Community Board 8 are District 4 and District 5. So there were many members of our Community Board District. Community Board 6 also came because they represent Sutton Place. There were many people there from Roosevelt Island objecting to the plan because it didn't adhere to the guidelines that were set forth. So that's where we are up until tomorrow. Tomorrow is the date that the commission will be issuing to the city council yet another revised version of the map. There was an article in the New York Times today, which apparently has seen a draft version of that. And I'm just going to quote from this article because I think it's very enlightening. The article said, but perhaps the most eye-raising move involved relocating parts of Manhattan's east side, including Sutton Place, and portions of Hunter College to districts in Queens. So that pointed out that change. And then it quoted the chairman of the commission saying that, yes, that change needed to be made. So we're taking that to mean that they are going to leave Manhattan intact. There was no mention in the article what they're planning to do about Roosevelt Island, which we said made a very strong case. that it was always envisioned to be part of Manhattan. It should be part of Manhattan, but we don't know if it will remain in it. And the link, there is a public hearing tomorrow, no testimony, just listening to the vote. And it's at 11 o'clock. And if you want to listen in, the link is nyc.gov/redistricting. It will be presented to the city council. The city council can accept or reject or make suggestions, but the final decision is not up to the city council. It is up to the districting commission. And we need to wait and see how it comes out, and we may need to be doing more lobbying. Oh, one thing to be proud of, we were informed that our community had communicated the most, either by letter, many of us wrote letters to each of the commissioners, phone calls, and other means of any other community. We had the most communications to. So good for us. And let's keep our fingers crossed that they heard us, that Manhattan stays intact, and that Roosevelt Island stays with us. Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you very much. Sherry, do you want to handle the questions?
Sure. Rebecca? Can you
Just two
unmute?
quick things. I think it's actually going to be on Thursday, not tomorrow. The public hearing.
I'm sorry, I meant the 22nd. I apologize. It is the 22nd.
My second point is just, I don't know what this means. No one does, but they did very clearly say Sutton Place. There were other parts of the more east side of Manhattan that were drawn into the
50
Queens
streets.
district. So we should keep an eye on
parts
that.
of, yeah, right. Obviously. Okay, Lori Borres. Can you please unmute Lori Borres?
Hi. Yeah, I continue to be shocked by this whole thing, and the people who drew the lines. But my question is it? Well, actually, I'll have to read the New York Times. Does the New York Times have the complete redistricting map? Like, do they have a map that shows?
They somehow or other they got access to it, and that's what this article was in today. We'll get it on Thursday. It'll be revealed to the public on Thursday.
Right. Okay. I mean, because it sounds to me like there are parts other than Sutton Place, because Sutton Place only goes up, a certain amount, and then it turns into York Avenue. So how much of the east side is part of this?
50 blocks in Community Board 8 were recommended to be moved to Queens.
Oh my God. Okay.
Makes no sense. The article said Manhattan East Side, including some Sutton Place. So it's possible. And then, of course, they pointed out that there is a bridge that goes over Hunter College, and one part of the bridge, one section of the campus is in the Queens district, and one part is in the Manhattan district.
Oh my God.
So we're hoping that clearer minds. And then I should mention, I had a meeting. Rebecca Seawright had a meeting on Roosevelt Island that she invited me to go to, and the mayor was there. And we had a roundtable, and the mayor declared, Roosevelt Island is part of New York City. And I said, no, Roosevelt Island is also part of Manhattan. And he agreed. So we're hoping that he will put pressure on the commission to keep Roosevelt Island in Manhattan, with Manhattan.
Okay, just one more question. So you're saying that they cherry picked a portion of Hunter College in the center of the island? Yeah.
They put the line through, the Hunter College campus. Yes.
That's crazy. That is okay.
Right,
I'm sorry. I'm just like I said.
I know you're new to this, so yeah, we've been dealing with this.
It's
yes. All right. It's getting late. Let's move along here.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Ed.
Yeah, just want to say to everybody, the New York Times article mentions 9,500 comments. And I just say, well done to the Upper East Side and everybody who turned out. That was my, you have to be brilliant to say that, right? But it's all about participation, and well done. Proving again that, it is a participation, and keep up the pressure. And I was just going to say, job well done. Nicely
Yeah,
done.
we may need to get more letters out when we see what it looks like. So yeah, there was a lot of support. All the street association, neighborhood associations came out. There was tremendous support. We had a full bus that went up to Harlem to the public hearing. So yes, everybody really did. Let's go to Erica.
I just wanted to thank Shari and Alita and Chris Collins and Russell, because when the testimony was happening, Russell couldn't get in and I did, and there was texting and there was emailing, and what it was true civic activism in real time, because we were making it work. We were making the technology work for us, and we were relaying information back and forth to each other. So it was, it was a lesson for me, even being around this, activism for as long as I've been. But it was such an amazing experience that, Shari, if we need to do it again,
The only thing we didn't do at the public hearing was bring banners. We didn't do that, but I guess we're more sophisticated. We didn't bring banners, but we brought.
We'll do t-shirts.
And t-shirts, yeah. We didn't. The Roosevelt Island did bring t-shirts, but it was a great outpouring of people.
So thanks to the organizers for that.
A lot of persistence from a lot of people.
Yeah, there really was. Alita.
Thank you. I don't know if you made this point, and maybe Ed knows, and I'm sure you do too, Shari, but Roosevelt Island is different because, and my understanding is, and if someone said this again, just mute me, is that when it was created when it was switched to a residential community by REOC, it says that it's a part of Manhattan.
Yes, that point was made. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay. So how easy is it to change that in the city?
Well,
it's not going to, the redistricting is not going to change what boroughs in.
Yeah, it's still in the borough. It's just who represents them in city council. They're still part of Manhattan.
So there's no argument that even if that having a Queen's Council person diminishes the value of being considered. Okay, all right.
So there's still an argument.
I mean, we've made all those arguments, and we just have to hope that. I don't know, Rebecca Dencourt. I don't know if his hand is still up or if it's a new comment you want to make.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one part of the article. Basically, it's Hunter's main campus that was split into Districts 4 and 5 on Lexington Avenue. They do say keeping Hunter College's campus intact. That being said, we do have Hunter has property on the east side, the further east side, which was originally drawn into the Queens Council District. I don't think it's clear about the medical and research corridor based on this article.
No, we know that the district line went across the bridge that separates the two campuses. Their president came and testified about that. That's where
there was a further divide, which is that they're in the Belfer building and the site for the nursing and science building, which is in the medical corridor. That was always in District 5 historically, and the rest of Hunter is in District 4. But that was drawn into the Queens Council District, and that's not technically set in place. So that's the thing we have to keep an eye on.
Well, I think at this point we need to see what they come up with the new map. Oh, Valerie has joined us. Valerie Mason, can you unmute her, please?
I just wanted to say that I think it's unfortunate that the New York Times got a look at the maps before everybody else. I don't see why that's the case. And to Rebecca's point, I think the article is very cagey about what's going to be revealed on Thursday, because while they said Sutton Place wasn't going to move across, they didn't really say anything about Roosevelt Island. And it was
Doesn't
also
say anything about Roosevelt Island. No,
right.
not at all.
So I'm very
So-
concerned about that. And
Yeah, me too. Me too.
and the other thing is, it was also very fudged. While it focused on, Jennifer's great comment about a bridge too far and being split in half along Lexington Avenue. That wasn't the part that was going into Queens. It was just the lot where the nursing school is over on between York and the river. So the article completely missed that point as well. So I'm a little bit nervous about relying on that article to tell us how things are going to shake out. And,
We
and to
don't
be
know.
honest, we were not the only ones. I mean, there's some really egregious rezoning that went on in Queens as well, over at the Rochdale Housing Project, which is a co-op in Queens, which is next to Co-op City, like the largest cooperative in the city of New York. And that was, one building was in one district and the other building's in another district, and they're literally the same community. So some crazy things are happening, and it's going to be very
Yeah.
interesting.
We'll
I'm
see
glad
what
that
they
Will
do.
sent around today the access to the meeting on Thursday. So if you don't have anything to do at 11 o'clock, I would just tune in. You're not allowed to speak, but at least you'll be able
No,
to
it
see
just
when the
you
map
can
is
just
revealed.
listen.
So that's it.
Right. All right. I really would like to wrap this up. Alita, are you asking to speak again? Your hand is still up. No. Okay. Peggy, let's wrap this up. It's 8:15.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. It was really great. I've gotten some very favorable feedback already from tonight's program. So thank you all for participating and for joining us tonight. And let's keep the momentum going. So for now, just want to say thank you very much to all the speakers, and see you all tomorrow night at the full board meeting.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.